Hello and welcome to Sumersports Live Cotton Bowl reaction as we're narrowing down to Ohio State with the victory over Texas. I'm Quinn McLean and I'm joined with Parker Fleming. Parker, how you doing? What are your initial reactions to this game?
I'm great. My initial reactions are all over the place because, just a wild sequence of events there. But a very winnable game for both teams did come down at the margins there both teams played very, very sloppily, came down at the margins to who made the last mistake there. And Texas goes from a favorable situation. They've got pass interference. They've got first down at the goal line, get a couple free plays down there and cannot capitalize on some explosives, end up turning the ball over and sealing their own fate. Very, very fun. Continues, Quinn, again, our streak of competitive games here in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I don't think the end of the results of this game will really show how competitive this game was up until that Sawyer strip sack. If we're to go scoring plays through, and we can kind of dive into some of the deep plays and the big scoring plays of the game. To start off, like Ohio State was really in rhythm on that scripted drive, ended with the 9-yard touchdown from Judkins, and then we get into Texas. We have some big plays on their end, which I'll let you kind of dive into, and that ends with a couple 3-and-outs back and forth, and then to end the right before the second half ended, we had the blue 18-yard reception from Quinn Ewers. Ohio State gets the ball back, immediately gets into a 75-yard screen pass to Henderson, who he continues his streak of explosive plays through this college football playoffs. And then we get into the second half a bit where, and this is a fun stat that we quoted, that this was the first third quarter touchdown for Texas since November 9th against Florida. They started off with blew another 26-yard reception from Quinn Ewers, goes back to Ohio State with the fourth down decision, the QB power for Will Howard extension that leads to a 1-yard rush from Judkins. And then we saw the strip sack from Sawyer, 83-yard fumble return on a long drive for Texas that kind of put the game out of sights. Parker, any plays I missed in that? Any ones that kind of pop off to you?
Yeah, a couple stood out. I think we saw early on Texas get a couple explosives and not be able to capitalize, and then Ohio State get some sustained success and not be able to seal the deal, whether that was because of penalties or lack of execution. The first drive, Matthew Golden has a one-handed grab for 22 yards on that, and that's a first down, a big explosive there. Texas can't capitalize. The second drive, Quinn, Ryan Wingo on that screen pass, we'll call that a rush. I factored that into some rushing yards there instead of a pass, but gets the ball behind the line of scrimmage and is absolutely gone were it not for Caleb Downs and just the shoestringest of shoestring tackles to save a touchdown and completely flip the script of the game starting out right there. So those two stood out to me just because those were opportunities for Texas to capitalize on the big play, and they couldn't in either situation. You saw it about the second drive there, the running back, or the second drive before the end of the half for Texas, the running backs started to pick up, and you saw them get more involved. JTT was hurt for Ohio State, so there's some opportunity for Texas to exploit while he was out. Also, Matthew Golden goes out with an injury a little bit earlier as well. The running backs shoulder the load. They started really, really rolling. You saw Arch come in and get a play where maybe he got hurt on that. That was a disaster of a play, kind of
Maybe
all
it was a
around.
fumble too, right?
Yeah, it might have been a fumble. Evidently, the hair on the back of your hand touching the ground does constitute being down there. So not a fumble by rule of law, but everyone gets involved. Ewers makes just a great play. They kind of go back to Texas goes back to starting here and into the second half, that early season form where they're not going to Bond. They're not going to Golden. They are going to their bread and butter. We want to find Helm. We want to find Blue. I think Blue about halfway through the season was the leading receiver for Texas, and the wide receivers kind of emerged later on. So a little bit return to early season form there. As well. So huge plays for Texas in that first half and kind of a good diversity there. Ohio State gets a little bit of a short field after that Texas fourth down conversion and scores on that, and then just doesn't do much until the end of the half where 75-yard screen touchdown to Henderson. Huge credit there, Quinn, and I'll stop this monologue there. Carson Hensman makes an excellent downfield block. You know the screen is working, Quinn, when you've got two 300-plus pound linemen like 9 yards down the field looking for someone else to hit. Heinzman hits, just chips a defender and creates some space, and then Henderson is absolutely gone. Ohio State scores, and again, saving the game state, preserving the lead for Ohio State. So huge there, putting Texas on their heels.
Yeah, and that's a nice transition into talking about the matchups here. First, I want to touch on Ohio State against this Texas defense. I think going to the game, you kind of alluded to it that Ohio State's offense has been banged up for the greater majority of this year, and they found a way to kind of get the blocks that they need to. And I think some of that comes into the scheme that Chip Kelly drives up. It's more zone blocking. You don't have to sustain your blocks for as long. Donovan Jackson moving from that left guard into the left tackle role has done an excellent job this year for them. I think the first half, if we want to dive into this a little bit of Ohio State against Texas, is the scripted plays for Ohio State. I thought was very interesting that when you watch Will Howard, he likes to target the boundaries a lot, and rightfully so. He's got Egbuka and Smith, who are freaks on the outside he can pass to, but in that scripted play, they went over the middle pretty consistently. And I'm wondering if they were trying to move the gravity, if you will, of these people into the center of the field to create space on the outside for subsequent plays as the game goes on. But Texas,
yeah, I think Quinn, I think the kids are calling that Hank there, and they ran that Hank concept over and over again. And you kind of knew, like, okay, Will Howard is throwing the ball into very tight windows. Texas clearly is not 100% prepared for what they're about to do here. Something is going to get, like, they can't keep doing this, and they couldn't keep doing it there, even as they were pretty efficient. Of note as well, Jeremiah Smith, 2 targets, 1 catch, 3 yards in the first half, just an absolute non-factor there.
Yeah, I was going to say Texas adjusted in that second drive, and I think they just took out the Michigan defensive playbook here. Play too high, stop the run, right, and limit anything underneath, and really took Jeremiah Smith out of the game. And what I thought I saw more, and we'll get into the second half, is a lot of rotation amongst these corners into doubling up on Smith. So you saw a lot of pre-snap movement, and that started to get into the head of Will Howard a little bit, took out the middle of the field and took out Smith, and he was kind of questioning where to go from there. And that's where you saw the pass rush and more of these coverage sacks come into play. I think Texas.
And you wonder if that's not an issue of timing there as well for Howard, like having to do that movement just adds an extra beat. Is that something that they weren't 100% prepared for? Maybe needed some more reps in practice, because it did feel like he settled down to that a little bit later in the game and was able to get that ball downfield. But you saw as they were trying to move guys around and get creative, Howard was struggling a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think the other narrative that is my big takeaway from this game is a lot of these penalties were really drive killers for Ohio State as they're building momentum against this Texas defense. The unsportsmanlike conduct from Travion Henderson, the offensive holding kind of dug them into a dovetail to where they were putting these obvious passing situations for Howard, and Texas had the answer for it. It felt like getting into the second half here with the Ohio State offense against Texas, and then we'll come back to Texas offense to wrap it up. But it felt like Texas was kind of baiting Will Howard into throwing into the more of the middle of the field, and you saw they put more disguised coverages as this game went on, and that resulted in that interception. And they had the linebacker come up, and then he dropped back into coverage, and Will Howard kind of threw an obvious pick into that linebacker there. Where I think the Ohio State offense really kind of countered with Texas is they created a little bit more of this unbalanced sets. You saw this on the fourth down, the QB power with Will Howard. They had the trips on the right-hand side. Will Howard went left. He almost broke it for a touchdown, resulted in that 1-yard score for Judkins. But it felt like Chip Kelly was opening up the play calling a little bit at the 8-minute mark in the third quarter. Anything you see from that portion in the second half, Parker?
Yeah, I actually noticed that you mentioned the unbalanced sets and they were running like 13 personnel and running out of it a little bit. And I actually wondered if that wasn't due to Ohio State's offensive line instability and the fact they couldn't get into their whole playbook and what they wanted in the run game, and that they had to bring in some extra blocking there. And it looked like it was, it wasn't clicking there. Howard settled fine on the night in terms of passing 289 yards, a touchdown, interception, 73% completion. On 33 attempts, but really a non-factor in the run game on aggregate. He did have that. He got his moment. He got his scramble there on the fourth down. Was able to go, counter that Quinn Ewers play we'll talk about and do that. He did look like he just fell down the open field and maybe didn't have the wheels. He probably wasn't going to make it to the end zone anyway there, but did get his moment. And again, similar to what we saw last night, Quinn, this is a matter of two teams very, very similarly matched. Strengths and weaknesses very different. And two coordinators who were very flexible on the fly. So you saw a lot of poking and prodding, and it just kind of felt like who could last the longest, who could take the best shot. I think I ran a little Twitter poll about just after halftime. It was like, who has the momentum? And everyone voted Ohio State. Texas 3-and-out, then Ohio State 3-and-out, and then suddenly it looks like it's Texas's game. And at any point, if you asked who had the momentum, you would have said someone different, just because this was so back and forth to the very end.
Yeah, I think my quote of the night would be the defense coordinators took away the carpool lanes of these offensive, juggernauts, and really wanted them to switch lanes, which obviously would force them to get into these turnover battles, which is what they wanted to win. And they tried to find these mismatches by taking out the easy buttons that these teams are used to. Before we dive into the Texas offense versus Ohio State, I wanted to give a shout out to Colin Simmons, who's just been an absolute juggernaut. He showed that of this freshman class in the future gets us very excited to continue to watch, the Ryan Wingos, the Jeremiah Smiths, and the Colin Simmons. I think they were double teaming him a lot, and he just caused havoc for that right tackle the entire night. So I think he was kind of.
I never want to be this guy. I think he would have had a much inflated stat sheet if they had consistently called holding across the game. There was a couple plays where he was arms up and just completely on the shirt there for Simmons. But yeah, he's just a very disruptive player and really stepped up. Texas also with a couple nice A gap pressures. I think there was the sack on Howard there as well. That there's just a little stunt for the nose tackle, the big man to stunt, move gaps and get there. Just a very, very impressive effort as well. So yeah, liked what I saw from Texas's front at times to kind of get disruptive and get creative and do really feel like, I think before we shift to the other side of the ball, do feel like Texas's defense did more than enough to keep them in this game. Looking at what Ohio State did to Tennessee, who, very good defensive front, very bad defensive backfield, I think is how I'd say that. Oregon, who struggled with rust, was off a little bit, maybe not as talented on the, maybe their peaks are not as high as Texas's, but their valleys, or Tennessee's rather, but their valleys aren't as low, a little more middle of the road. Texas did plenty on defense to keep themselves in this game and set their offense up to win, and just couldn't do it there at the end.
Yeah, it felt like they were trying to find a moment for the offense to get back into this game and find a drive for them to get some points on the board. So let's shift gears to the Texas offense against this Ohio State defense. The high level for me before I turn it over to you is a lot of quick passes from Quinn Ewers. It felt like Sark was putting him into this box a little bit, and a lot of checkdowns to the running backs. We counted on the night 14 targets to the running backs at the end of the game, which is, over half of the total targets to the entire wide receiver core. And part of that is Golden was injured for 2 quarters. He went back in for 3 quarters, an ankle injury. And then Bolden was, coming back from injury during this playoffs, had that throw that was kind of behind him, but he ran too fast and got mixed up, and where he looked like an unathletic move, but it's also, he was just way athletic because he's super fast.
Not to be the guy again that dunks on like the commentators there, but in that moment, but they were talking about like, oh, why did he jump? What was this? And it was like very clear that the ball was behind him. And it was like, the gentleman can't stop time and move back and get the timing on the pass. Like the pass was behind him, so he jumped to try to catch the ball. And it was one of those like, hey, you made a really athletic attempt at a ball that was behind you, so it looked like you were dropping. I don't know if I was charting that, if I would call that a drop.
Yeah, and the other thing about this offense too is not the quick passing game, which I think someone on Twitter called it the Madden play of the shark wheel, but renamed aptly to the Sark wheel. So you get the running back on the flats and it's unbeatable. But the other thing on their offense is the outside runs. Blue on the season rushes outside of the DNC gap 51% of the time, and that's something that you started to see as the game went on. The Ohio State defensive core started to contain the outside, take away the outside a little bit, and force Quinn Ewers to kind of hit the middle of the field and try to get off of his cadence of the quick passes. I think that's a little bit of an indictment on Quinn Ewers, as we've seen throughout the season. It's just his pocket management has to improve at the next level. And there's been times where you hope he would step into the pocket. There's times where he didn't step into the pocket, and if I was Sark, I would try to find ways to get him a little bit more mobile outside the pocket, switch in a little bit of play action to get that deep passing game going, because it seemed that Ohio State was playing more of that cover 3 and to the same kind of counter that Texas saw is keep everything in front of you, force him to stay in the pocket a little bit more. We know we'll get some coverage sacks after a while. Is kind of what I alluded to from the Ohio State defense. What stood out for you in that first half?
Yeah, for an offense that is predicated on the idea, Sark said this in one of his clinics a while back, just that Jalen Waddle and I are the same speed standing still. Like you want to hit the guy that's open. Ohio State did a wonderful job on defense of creating traffic, both literally in creating pressure early on, but in the way the defensive backfield kind of boxed out some of those receivers and really forced things outside. Where Ohio State's defense struggled and where Texas offensively excelled was just forcing those missed tackles, the running backs in space. Ryan Wingo with that screen for is a great example of this, of being able to get outside and create under duress, make some screens there as well. I do want to note Texas's offense got a good punt return, big special teams play, maybe the only notable special teams play of the entire game. Did almost lose the fumble there, but survives to live another day, and got an offensive face mask on a block and just completely wiped out by penalties, which was just the tail of the tape for both of the teams here as well. I think, Quinn, we have to talk about some instability in the first half from Texas. Ewers comes in after Arch converts that fourth down, makes that amazing play, hits the wheel route. They score a touchdown. And then they have a shortest field to start the second half. No Golden. Ewers takes a sack. They punt. And then we have the drive. This is the drive. This is his game-making moment. And unfortunately, he went back and re-broke the game in a different direction later on. But they get a false start. You think, man, they're already washed out here. Ewers has just an incredible improv, just milliseconds before his knee hits the ground, flips it to Jaden Blue. I think the announcers gave credit is due for Ewers for making that play. Jaden Blue made a great play there, creating something out of nothing as well, and being aware of that. Wisner got very, very involved here. I called this drive junk ball, Quinn. It was the first sustained real meaty drive we had, 5 minutes and 18 seconds of possession. Ohio State would go on to match that and exceed that later on with a meteor drive themselves. But they were just throwing everything out there. They were back and forth to the field, to the boundary, just getting the ball to open guys and letting them create in space. It was just amazing. The wheel route is literally impossible to defend when you've got the offense cooking there. But then there at the end, it does look like Texas is going to go back to the Sark bread and butter. They run the tight end leak. Helm is wide open. Silly penalty, caught up in the moment. Just don't do that. Like, I don't want that to be flagged. I don't want pointing at an opponent to be flagged. It's going to be flagged. Don't do that. Silly mistake kind of sets them back. But then they go straight to Golden and overcome it. They've got these two explosives. They get a favorable pass interference call on down one. They get a favorable pass interference call on down two. They have 5 chances at the goal line and cannot score. Quinn, the defense set them up for the position. The field got short, just like it did for Texas and maybe the entirety of Quinn Ewers' career. The field gets short. They get in those scoring opportunities and they cannot finish them. They did it last year against Washington. They did it last year at a game they won against Alabama by 10. They couldn't finish drives. We've just seen it over and over again. And it does seem poetic a bit that this is what their game came down to. This is what their season came down to for the second year in a row.
Yeah, and I think Ohio State did a good job of confusing him a little bit. And I want to give kudos to Jack Sawyer. I know that a lot of people come out of the fumble, strip sack, fumble touchdown, but early in the first half, one thing I noticed about him and like back-to-back drives, they lined him up in a lot of different alignments. And credit to Knowles in terms of like focusing on my key player and trying to get him open and generate a pressure for him. And there was 3 back-to-back snaps where he went inside, he went outside, and then he started as a linebacker, went in towards as a bull rush, batted the pass. And in that 3 consecutive, it was 2 pressures, batted pass, and was obviously a difference maker. Although Texas in the second half was trying to take him out of the game in a little bit in a couple different ways. They went tempo for a few different plays back to back, slowed it down. They, obviously the checkdowns to different running backs to extend it. And then there was a couple different plays where they were pulling left guards to the right side to try to chip him and slow him down as well. So they tried their best in terms of like diffusing him a little bit, knowing that JTT had that injury. If you can take Sawyer out of the game, JTT's a little bit banged up. Maybe you have a little bit more of a chance with Quinn Ewers staying in the pocket a little bit to find someone open downfield. I think was kind of the Texas playbook that I saw them try to get into this game. But the other thing for this too that really caused some issues for Quinn Ewers is Ohio State just has this luxury of Simon Styles and Downs being interchangeable between safety and linebackers that they can rotate those guys back and forth, and no team can really do anything about it because they're so athletic. And they have this, blessing in terms of leaving their corners on an island a lot that they can mix and match in terms of where their safeties and the pre-snap looks that they can show. And I think that kind of caused a lot of issues for Quinn Ewers in terms of progressions down the field, knowing that his receivers out of the games, but adding that confusion of simulated pressures and guys dropping back when they should have, I think would cause havoc on him in terms of like generating a moment, a big deep pass play that you would have hoped for from him. Anything
Absolutely,
else?
and a nice bridge there just from pregame expectations from Jim Knowles and kind of the disguising that he's done all season and what we thought they would do there. And we saw it bear out. It worked there. I'm good. I want to respect the relatively firm, not very firm, 20-minute cap there, Quinn. I will say we will definitely be back for the national championship. Post-game live. Quinn, if I had to guess, I'm not going to promise anything live on air here. We're probably going to talk about that game before it happens. That would be my guess in the next week as well. So we'll keep you posted on socials there as well. Anything else for you? I'm good. You can sign us off.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Ohio State, Notre Dame, a battle of the blue bloods, if you will, into the next round of the championship. I think that's a very fitting start to the expanded college football playoff. And so to wrap us up, I'm Quinn McLean. He's Parker Fleming, and this has been Sumersports Live.